This is not a message. This is disclosure. If this finds you, you were identified. Listen to the difference in that sentence. Not an invitation, not a rumor, a marking. There is a hush that has been settling behind your awareness, a soft tightening across the ribs, the sense that something very deliberate just brushed past the edge of your life and left a shape. That shape has a name. You have been positioned. You were identified. Before you try to explain it away, feel chest, that small warmth spreading under the sternum, like a sun rising there and then shifting slightly toward your throat. That warmth is not anxiety, it is recognition. It is the body remembering a thread it had lost. If the hairs on the back of your neck have been rising for no visible reason, if synchronicities seem to click into place when they used to scatter, if decision-making has tightened into a different logic, these are not accidents. These are signals. They are the first language you will be speaking from now on. There is no single story here of lights in the sky or loud proclamations on the news. The Arcturians' contact, as it has been revealed to those who receive these transmissions, happens first inside the contours of being. It arrives as calibration, it arrives as permission, it arrives as selection. You did not stumble into this, you aligned into it. What follows is a map, not a manual, not a guarantee, but a set of unmistakable signatures. The Arcturians describe the people they choose as carriers, nodes that hold a subtle architecture of frequency and presence. You are a carrier when your interior matches the pattern. There are 7 distinct markers the field uses to identify and position a person within this network. We call them the 7 signal carriers. Listen to them slowly. Let each name float against the place where you feel the chest warmth. Do not rush. These are experiential markers. They will resonate or they will not. That resonance is your proof, not my words. 1. Internal pivot. The subtle inside turn where energy locks to a new trajectory. You will know this as a quiet decision made by a body that is not quite yours. It is the moment you realize choices no longer feel like options but like directions. The pivot is not theatrical. It is a hinge inside the neural contours of habit. One morning you wake and a habit that used to comfort you no longer fits. You feel an inner alignment shift as if a compass needle inside you dropped into a new magnetic pull. That drop is precise, intimate, almost invisible to others. It feels like returning home to a place you have never been but have always recognized. 2. Intuitive pressure. Intuition shifts from whisper to directive, insisting on immediate alignment. This is not the casual nudge of intuition you have known. It is a pressure that moves like a tide, clear, insistent, pointing toward an immediate correction. Where before you might have waited for external confirmation, now a clarity wells up that asks you to act, to rearrange, to refuse something you would once have accepted. The sensation can be startling, a tightening at the base of the skull, a clear image so vivid it feels like instruction. It is less voice and more directive, not anxiety, not mere hope, but the body's map of what is aligned. 3. Stabilizing presence. A felt resonance arranging the space around your awareness. People near you will feel something different, even if they cannot name it. Rooms become easier to breathe in. Conversations settle into honest tones faster. Your presence, when aligned, acts like a tuning fork that steadies brittle patterns. This stabilizing field is not charisma or performance. It is a recalibration of atmosphere. You will notice it when fights cool down, when strangers trust your word, when a house's tension loosens without you saying why. That is the carrier effect. The inner coherence extends outward. 4. Emotional recalibration. Old cycles dissolve or crack because they are incompatible with your role. This signal is messy and merciful at once. Patterns you wore like armor start to unravel because those patterns are no longer sustainable at the frequency you now carry. Grief you thought contained will surface. Habits that used to soothe will splinter. But with that cracking comes a stabilization you did not anticipate. You are not falling apart so much as being reconfigured. Emotional thresholds change. Where you once spiraled into chaos, now you might simply note, adjust, and choose differently. It is a slow unlearning of reactions that have defined you, replaced by a steadier nervous system. 5. Directional synchronicities. Synchronicities cluster with purpose, becoming coordinates, not decoration. Synchronicity turns from pleasant coincidence into clear coordinates. Numbers, repeated names, encounters that used to amuse now point. These events will align around tasks, locations, or decisions, not randomly, but with a kind of cartography. A neighbor's offhand comment leads to an introduction that matters. A book falls off a shelf that contains a phrase you need. These are not signs of destiny in a theatrical sense, but signals, timing markers placed to confirm alignment with the work you have been prepared to do. 6. Future self-resonance, an inner authority and preemptive guidance from a nearer future self. You will begin to hear and trust a tone inside you that speaks from a version of you closer to the future than the present. This is not fantasy. It is the perception of a more mature template stepping through now. It gives instructions that feel like they come from years ahead, calm, strategic, merciful. The information is sparse, always proportionate to your capacity to receive it. It may come as a vivid memory of choices you have not yet made, or as an unshakable sense of this is what happens next. Learning to meet that voice without idolizing it is part of the work. 7. Acceleration and pause. Life accelerates in signature ways and offers pauses of alignment. Time reshapes around your next stage. Once the previous 6 are present, tempo changes. Life compresses and expands in unfamiliar rhythms. Sudden opportunities appear with compressed timelines, or months of apparent stillness serve as intense internal work. The Arcturians describe this pattern as the calendar of initiation, bursts of acceleration followed by intentionally placed pauses that allow integration. You will know the pause as a contained stillness that is not avoidance but composition. Time stops being a steady line and becomes a series of deliberate accelerations and rests designed to move you into the next frequency. These 7 signals do not always arrive cleanly or in order. Sometimes 2 appear simultaneously. Sometimes a person experiences the future self-resonance months before the stabilizing presence becomes visible to others. What matters is the match, how your interior comes to mirror these signatures. If more than one of these markers resonates, consider the probability that you have been identified and positioned within a plan that is quietly unfolding. If this stirred something inside you and you feel a pull to stabilize it, a protected member circle offers deeper transmissions and alignment support. The circle is a space for containment, not instruction, a place to integrate, to practice the calibration of these signals with others who carry similar resonance. Hold that invitation like a hand offered when you are tired, available, optional, there if you want it. Now, after the enumeration, let me pause and return you to the threshold where this began. Naming the signals is not the same as feeling their edges inside the body. The real work is how these signatures were prepared in you, how the field adjusted to host them. The Arcturians do not simply notice people and suddenly place a label. There is preparatory engineering, careful, protective, iterative, that unfolds before selection is disclosed. Think of it like a surgical restoration of a radio antenna that had been bent. First, the inner components are recoded. Your emotional thresholds are rewired so that reactions which once amplified instability now dampen it. Then bandwidth increases. Your intuitive channels widen to receive subtler frequencies without overload. Identity shifts occur as old roles are trimmed. The parts of you that served prior identities are given a chance to rest. Timeline collapses happen in small increments. Memories are rethreaded so that the future becomes more reachable without erasing the lessons that brought you here. You may have experienced some of this as a long season where nothing seemed to work according to your old expectations. Jobs, relationships, patterns that once fit either unraveled or shifted. Those are not punishments, they are calibrations. The field around you was being prepared to hold a new bandwidth, and to make room, former fittings were unsoldered. Here are the key processes the Arcturians focus on during preparation. Emotional engineering, smoothing reactive circuitry so you can hold tension without collapse. This is why many of you have found yourself less triggered by things that once caused upheaval. The nervous system is learning containment. Intuitive bandwidth expansion, gently widening your capacity to receive more varied, subtle cues without confusing them for fear or wish. This is why the pressure of intuition feels different now. The line has been enlarged. Identity shedding, a deliberate loosening of roles that have kept you small. As those roles drop away, the presence that remains is cleaner and more resonant. Timeline recalibration, small collapses and compressions that make certain future possibilities more accessible in the present moment. It looks like a sudden knowing about a choice that previously would have taken years to arrive at. All of these changes are protective, not punitive. They are carried out with the aim of creating a node, a person whose inner coherence will, by presence alone, stabilize a wire field. The Arcturians' plan is not set on spectacle, it is quietly structural. They are not storming the public square, they are upgrading compositions of being so that the collective field can shift from the inside. Picture a city where the central power grid has been slightly re-engineered in secret, line by line, so neighborhoods begin to hum at a steadier frequency. The lights do not explode in a spectacular burst, they start to stay on longer, and people notice that the street noise sounds softer at night. Those neighborhood hums are what the Arcturians are aiming at, many small adjustments that when combined alter the background frequency. That city metaphor becomes literal when you consider nodes. Nodes are not leaders in a traditional sense. They are carriers whose primary function is presence. They anchor a local field so that others in proximity are more likely to ascend into coherence without being coerced. A node does not command, a node stabilizes. When a node enters a room, arguments may cool. When a node sits with someone in pain, the person may find a steadier sorrow that is more solvable. Influence comes not from speech, but from the refined ordering of energy. You may already have been practicing this without the label. Perhaps you notice people breathing easier around you.
Maybe you felt others draw near in moments of crisis, not because you offered solutions, but because being there changed their physiology. Those are early demonstrations of node function. To give the sense of how this plays out in everyday life, imagine the following scene. You enter a crowded room where conversations are fracturing into anxiety and reactivity. You do not shout or attempt to command attention.
You stand near the center, breathe in a measured way that carries your internal pivot outward. The air seems to shift. People stop mid-sentence and smile in a way that is not performative. Later, someone will tell you they felt seen and steadied, though they cannot say why. That is how a carrier operates. Subtle, undeniable, often unnamed by those who are affected. There is also a more strategic dimension to the plan. Nodes function as bridges to future selves, not only their own future self, but a range of timelines whose coherence benefits from a stable anchor. This bridging is not a metaphysical shortcut. It is a disciplined tuning that allows more consistent signals from nearer future templates to slip through the present moment. Those nearer future templates are practical. They carry know-how about how to behave within the new field, about what choices to make, and about how to hold others without draining. Here is an early activation anchor you may use as a journaling prompt if it resonates. Write this phrase, slowly, as if signing a letter to a version of yourself you will meet. I accept my entry into the Arcturian plan as a being of service through presence. Keep it private. Use it as a marker, not a spell. This phrase is symbolic, an anchor to help your mind and body register a contract of alignment. You may feel nothing. You may feel everything. Both are valid. The point is not to create performance, but to offer an intentionality. After you try that, notice what changes. Does a thought arise? Does your breath move differently? The point of the phrase is to be a lever for attention, to help you recognize the interior pivot if it was too subtle to notice before. There is an etiquette to this process. The Arcturians emphasize consent and capacity. Selection is never coercion. People are not forced into nodes. Rather, those whose systems can accommodate the necessary bandwidth are carefully prepared and invited. If you resonate with these descriptions, it is because your physiology and emotional maturity reached a threshold where the field could safely anchor this work in you. It is important to acknowledge the discomfort that often accompanies elevation. When your emotional architecture is recalibrated, relationships that were keyed into your old frequency may fray. You may be accused of changing or abandoning people. The truth is more nuanced. You are being pruned to perform a different function, one that requires different boundaries. That pruning can be lonely. It can be misread as rejection. Prepare for that, and be gentle with yourself. The timeline adjustments can also feel disorienting. Decisions may compress. What once took months of deliberation may now arrive as a clear image requiring relocation. That compression is not always convenient, but it is purposeful. The Arcturians work in timing. They create openings and then place pauses so integration can occur. Those pauses are holy. Learn to honor them. If you are still with me, notice the inner narrative that arises. Do you feel resistant? Do you feel hungry? Do you feel tired and relieved at once? All of these reactions are part of the seed stage. None of them invalidate the identification. Now I will speak plainly about stabilization and the support available. Being a carrier increases sensitivity. Without containment, that sensitivity can become draining. This is why the member circle exists, not to promise miracles or to sell you transcendence, but to offer structured support, protected fields, and deeper transmissions that help you practice the skill of holding without burnout. In the circle, you learn techniques for integration, for anchoring your presence intentionally, and for practicing the gentle thresholds that make node work sustainable. It is a stabilizing support system, nothing more, nothing less. Take a beat and imagine the person you would be if your chest warmth stayed constant and your intuitive pressure became a reliable guide. How would your day change? Who would you be inside your family, inside your work? How would your relationships reorganize around a person who bears steady presence rather than reactivity? These are not hypothetical exercises. They help you orient toward the role you are being prepared to play. This is also the moment to be candid about ambiguity. All language here is experiential. The Arcturians, as conveyed by many who receive their transmissions, function as a guiding intelligence, not an authoritarian voice dictating outcomes. What they tune is interior architecture. The rest unfolds through human agency, consent, and the messy dynamics of everyday life. For many who resonate with this disclosure, there is a temptation to seek external proof. Look around for that proof, but remember, much of this work is covert by design. The public spectacle is not the point. The point is your capability to hold a new frequency so that those you touch may, by resonance, be guided into greater coherence. Small, quiet changes will be the evidence you need. Less reactivity, more accurate intuition, strategic synchronicity, and a steadier presence in chaos.
We are now approaching a deeper plane of explanation, the specific mechanics of the inner engineering, the way timeline collapses are orchestrated, the subtle practices that stabilize carriers in public life. I will take you there step by step, but first I want you to note this. Identification is selective, but it is not exclusive in a spiritual elitist way. The field is vast, and there are many nodes in formation at any given time. Your job is not to feel superior, but to feel responsible for how you manage what you have been given. Responsibility here looks like restraint, tenderness, disciplined boundaries, and consistent grounding practices. If you have written the activation phrase, keep it near you. If you have not, that is fine too.
Whether you accept the label of carrier publicly or keep it private, the work is the same: integration. The Arcturians' interest is in structural coherence, not in slogans or pageantry. What follows next is a closer look at the technical edges, the specific shifts in physiology and attention that the Arcturians calibrate during preparation. I will describe how emotional thresholds are adjusted, what the expansion of intuitive bandwidth looks like practically, and how timeline collapses are carried out without erasing agency. These are not formulas, they are descriptions meant to help you recognize the subtle operations inside your system. Emotionally, the rewire looks like a new form of containment. Imagine a dam that used to leak whenever the water rose. The engineering now strengthens the walls so that when storms come, the dam flexes instead of breaking. Practically, this means your lizard brain still registers threat, but your body is less likely to be hijacked. You may still feel the heat of anger or the stab of fear, but the reaction will be shorter, and your decision-making apparatus will remain accessible. This narrowing of reactivity is deliberate. It allows the node to remain available for others instead of collapsing under every emotional tide. Intuitively, expansion manifests as both clarity and discernment. Clarity shows up as crisp images or feelings that point the way. Discernment is the ability to differentiate between ego-driven desires that masquerade as intuition and the true directive of the future self-resonance. You will practice this discernment by comparing your impulses against the steadier tone of your future self voice. Over time, the two align more often, and false urgencies fall away. Timeline work happens in increments. It is not time travel in a cinematic sense, but a reordering of possibility so that certain likely outcomes are more readily accessed. Think of it as pruning a garden. Some unlikely branches are trimmed so the energy can redirect toward blooms that are ripe. This does not erase free will. It merely makes some pathways more probable by adjusting inner conditions. As I describe these processes, you might find a reluctance, an internal critic asking about ethics, about consent, about the broader implications. This skepticism is healthy and necessary. The Arcturians' methodology, as conveyed by those who report contact, integrates consent at multiple levels. You are not an unknowable experiment. You are a participant who has, through personal history and capacity, reached a threshold of readiness. There is much more to unpack. Practical exercises for grounding, specific rituals that serve as memory anchors without magical coercion, the way nodes coordinate with other nodes to create larger fields, and how to navigate relationships during recalibration. I will guide you through one of those practical anchors now, a second brief ritual meant to establish a daily habit of alignment. If it resonates, place a hand on your chest and breathe for 4 counts in, 6 counts out, imagining the warmth you felt at the beginning expanding into the collarbones and down the arms. After 3 breaths, in your journal write, "I align my presence with service as carrier." This is not a guarantee. It is a practice, repetition that helps the body remember the pivot. Use this practice sparingly. The point is not to manufacture identity, but to reinforce a choice that exists already within the threshold. The Arcturians call these moments micro-anchors, small rituals that help the nervous system retain new structural settings. They are not spells, they are training. We have arrived at a moment of transition. You have heard the 7 signals. You have felt, perhaps, the internal pivot and tasted the pressure of intuition. You have an invitation to a support field, and you have been given 2 optional anchors to help your system register the alignment. Ahead lies the deeper architecture, how carriers coordinate, how the member circle functions as a containment practice rather than an endpoint, and how your role might evolve into a public seamstress of frequency without becoming a spectacle. But before moving fully into operational detail, hold fast to one truth. Being identified does not relieve you of the ordinary demands of life. It reframes them. It asks you to carry everyday tasks with a different discipline. You will still pay bills, care for family, and sit in traffic. Carrying is not glamorous. It is sustained, quiet labor. As you prepare for the next layer, notice the sensations in your body again. Are they different now than when you first began listening? Is the chest warmth more focused? Is there a small tightening beneath your ribs where the future self-voice lingers? Keep those observations. They are the evidence you will return to when doubt rises. When we continue, we will move into the topology of the field itself, how notes form networks, the ethics of transmission, and the specific patterns used to stabilize carriers in volatile environments. We will also unpack the member circle in more practical terms, not as a sales pitch, but as an explanation of how containment practice is taught and maintained.
For now, rest in the recognition that you were not randomly found. You were positioned. You were identified. The field has selected you for a role that asks less of spectacle and more of steady presence. The rest will unfold in the moments that follow. But first, keep your hand on your chest and breathe once more, feeling the warmth anchor. Hold that breath, and when you are ready, we will step deeper into the map. Hold that breath. When you let it go, nobody else has to know what shifted inside you. The work we are about to describe is quietly practical and quietly radical. It does not require you to become someone else. It requires you to learn to hold what you already are with new steadiness.
Step forward with soft feet. The field in which nodes operate looks less like a parade and more like a woven grid of subtle currents. Imagine not points on a map, but threads crossing, some thick, some thin, moving with different tensions and temperatures. Each node is a point where thread and current meet and stabilize a small region of the weave. When one node tightens, the adjacent threads hum differently. When one softens, nearby edges ease. The Arcturians, as those who receive these transmissions describe them, attend to that weaving. Their method is to change tension where the weave is brittle, to smooth a thread where it frays, to encourage rhythm where there is chaotic vibration. Coordination between nodes is rarely dramatic. It is a conversation of small gestures, a deliberate breath, a timing that allows two people to occupy complementary tempos, a refusal to escalate when provocation arrives. Nodes learn to listen for cadence, when to mirror, when to hold steady apart, so that their combined presence creates a larger field that is coherent without being coercive. This is why secrecy and discretion are valued. The work gains its leverage not from spectacle, but from sustained coherence. Practically, nodes use 3 categories of practice to coordinate without collapsing into dependency: personal containment, field hygiene, and calibrated outreach. Personal containment is your daily inner architecture. It is the set of habits that keep the nervous system stable so you can show up consistently. These are small practices repeated with intentionality. A morning check-in that asks, "What is my threshold today?" A midday micro-anchor where you place a hand on your chest and name one clear intention. An evening inventory that notices how much energy you spent and where. The point is rhythmic maintenance, not performance. Containment keeps you from being drained by intensity, and it creates a baseline so that your presence is not erratic. Field hygiene is the etiquette that preserves a node's usefulness. This includes simple things like honoring consent before offering energetic work to another person, avoiding unsolicited projection of your inner material, and limiting transmissions in environments that are already destabilized. Field hygiene also means choosing when to speak and when to embody. For a carrier, influence is more often a steadying silence than a persuasive speech. It is how you breathe in a crowded subway, not how you preach in it. Calibrated outreach is the selective strategic engagement with others. Sometimes your role asks you to move towards someone who is falling into chaos. Sometimes it requires you to step back to protect your bandwidth. Calibrated outreach is never a rescue. It is an offering of presence that is clear about boundaries. When you approach, you do so with an intention you can sustain. You do not overextend. You do not confuse kindness with permission to be consumed. Nodes also form loose constellations, groups of carriers who trust one another's presence and practice coordinated containment in places where the field is particularly volatile. These constellations operate on principles: consent, reciprocity, and minimum announcement. They practice low-profile synchronizations, a scheduled short transmission to a neighborhood, a coordinated presence at a tense community meeting, a shared containment circle after a charged public event. The aim is to avoid spectacle while amplifying steadiness in places that need it. You may wonder how a node learns to coordinate without becoming the center of attention. The answer is training and restraint. In the member circle and in informal pairings, carriers practice exercises that feel mundane but are profound in effect. Synchronized breathing for 5 minutes, passing attention silently across a group, practicing neutral language when confronted with provocation, rehearsing how to leave a scene without dragging emotional debris. These are rehearsals, not magic. Rehearsals condition the body and the field to respond with coherence under pressure. Ethics sits at the heart of all coordination. The Arcturians' work as conveyed emphasizes consent at every level. Selection is offered to systems that can hold it. Invitations are not forced. There is a moral infrastructure to being a node. Do no harm through overreach. Offer accompaniment rather than answers. And always respect the autonomy of other minds and bodies. These principles may sound obvious, but they are practiced fiercely because power wielded without ethics becomes harm faster than you expect. When people in your orbit are injured by your presence, when they feel left out or misunderstood or overshadowed, the responsibility falls to the node to repair, not to justify. Repair looks like listening, apology where appropriate, and clarifying boundaries with tenderness. This is not a sign of weakness, it is an advanced discipline. The ability to hold your own shadow, to own the places where your presence misstepped, is what keeps the grid from tearing. Coordination also requires technical discernment.
the difference between a true intuitive directive and a fear dressed as prophecy. You will be tempted at times to interpret every nudge as destiny. That is why discernment training is a part of preparation. You learn to test guidance against two things: a future self-tone that is consistent and merciful, and the effect of the guidance on those around you. If an instruction systematically reduces other people's agency, it is suspect. If it aligns with increased coherence and consent, it is likely legitimate. Discernment grows with practice, with witnessing the longer arc of decisions, and noticing which impulses reliably lead to stability. The mechanics of timeline work require care and language. The Arcturians process, as described in Transmissions, is not time travel with flashy paradoxes. It is subtle reweighting.
Imagine a hallway with many doors. The field does not blow any door off its hinges. It nudges the handles of doors that are structurally sound for you to open now. Over time, some paths become easier because your decisions and the surrounding circumstances have been aligned to favor certain options. This alignment doesn't remove agency, it alters probability by changing inner conditions, thresholds, confidence, clarity, so that choosing those doors becomes more likely and sustainable. How does this feel in practice? A few vignettes will make it concrete without promising inevitability. You are at a family dinner. An old pattern flares. Someone attempts to provoke you into a defensive role that used to suck you under. Instead of performing the old collapse, you feel the inner pivot, a brief, steadying breath that cuts the energy of reactivity. You do not need to explain your history. You simply alter the tempo with a soft, coherent presence. The moment does not become a lecture, it becomes a repositioning. Later, a relative remarks that the evening felt calmer, and you can see the micro-shift ripple. Your role was not to fix the person, it was to hold a space where repair could begin. Another scene, you are at work when a sudden crisis erupts. A colleague is panicked, decisions must be made, and the room risks fracturing. You do not claim authority, you stabilize by naming one small procedural step and anchoring the group in it. People orient around the task rather than their fear. The crisis resolves without drama because presence created clarity. Your contribution was not spectacle, it was the humble act of studying. Finally, imagine a neighbor in grief who refuses help. You sit with the permission you have, steady in your presence, offering no platitudes, only the permission to be human. Sometimes a node's most potent work is simply being available without trying to change the other's experience. That availability, held without urgency, becomes transformative over time. These vignettes point to an essential truth. Influence as a carrier is relational, not hierarchical. It is not about leading people into belief, but about making the environment safer for their own coherence to emerge. Given the subtlety of this role, regular practice is essential. Here are sustainable practices you can use daily, described as options rather than prescriptions. Morning alignment check. 3 minutes at the start of your day to notice tone, name one intention, and make one practical boundary for the day. Keep it simple. Today I hold presence, and I will step away from conversations that require me to solve other people's grief. Energy inventory. Twice a day, notice where your attention has gone. If you feel depleted, give yourself one small repair. A glass of water, 5 minutes alone, an email unsent. Micro anchors. Small, repeatable gestures. Placing a hand on your heart and breathing. Rearranging your shoulders. A silent reminder phrase like steady or soft focus. These act like mental bookmarks for the nervous system. Integration journaling. One paragraph in the evening noting where you held steady and where you slipped. Reflection without judgment deepens learning. Boundary rehearsals. Practice saying concise, compassionate exits. I need to step away for a moment, or I can sit with you, but I can't take over this decision. Rehearsal creates muscle memory. These practices are not exclusive or exhaustive. They are scaffolding. The real work is how they become habitual enough to alter the default curve of your reactions. We now return to the structure and intent of the member circle, because for many people this kind of containment is most effectively learned in community. The member circle is not a shrine or a cult. It is a small, moderated container where practice, transmission, and mutual support are offered in a protected environment. Think of it as a workshop combined with a sanctuary, an environment to rehearse presence under guided conditions, and to receive transmissions that feel denser and more stabilizing than brief public messages. Practically, the circle includes a few core elements: scheduled group transmissions that are intended to be subtle and integrative rather than theatrical, guided practices for containment and discernment, peer pairings for supervised exercises, and optional short integration talks with a facilitator. The space is intentionally limited and private to preserve safety and avoid overstimulation. The emphasis is on practice and integration, not on escalating claims. Privacy measures in the circle are basic but essential. Discussions are off-record unless explicitly agreed upon. Members are asked to respect confidentiality.
Sessions are held in environments that protect audio and identity when necessary. The circle's leadership frames the work as service-oriented and non-exploitative, mentorship, not mastery, accompaniment, not authority. Members are encouraged to retain autonomy and to use the circle as a rehearsal field, not a dependency. Importantly, the circle does not promise accelerated miracles. It offers practices, shared experience, and support for those who feel called to deepen this work. It is a place to experiment with coordination, to receive longer-form transmissions in a contained setting, and to meet other notes who are learning to hold their gifts without collapsing. If you choose to step into that space, expect to be asked about boundaries, about what you are able to manage emotionally, and about how you plan to integrate practice into your life. The circle's aim is to expand capability responsibly. It is not a quick fix. The tone is slow, steady, and intentionally humble. Practical questions often arise. How much time will this take? Will it change my job?
Will it alienate my friends? The honest answer is it depends on your life. For some, the integration is subtle and requires only 5 minutes a day. For others, recalibration may require temporary shifts in relationship structure or work roles. The common thread is that integration prioritizes sustainability over immediate change. The intention is to increase your capacity slowly so that any public shift is supported by robust private practice. A frequent concern is the moral implication of being positioned while others are not. Is this elitist? The answer, as practiced by those who steward these transmissions, is no, if the role is held with humility. Identification is not a moral ranking, it is a responsibility to manage a sensitivity. That responsibility involves humility, service, and an active refusal to exploit influence. In many teachings, those who hold this role are urged to remember the smallness of everyday kindness, carrying groceries for a neighbor, listening without advice, showing up in grief without needing to fix it. These acts matter no less than any public demonstration of presence. Doubt and skepticism are useful companions. You will need them. They keep your discernment sharp and your ethics aligned. When skepticism arises, test it. Apply practices, observe outcomes, consult trusted peers, and honor the slow evidence of change rather than dramatic proclamations. Now, a brief outline of how carriers sometimes enter into coordinated action without creating flashpoints. Imagine a neighborhood meeting where anxiety is high. A small constellation of nodes decides to attend. Their coordination is not announced. They agree on a simple protocol. All will arrive 10 minutes early to sit quietly. One will open the meeting by setting a clear intention for listening. Another will model measured tone. A third will observe and intervene only if escalation threatens safety. After the meeting, they debrief for 5 minutes, noting what worked and what drained them. Over months, this pattern of discrete support raises the meeting's baseline, so community decisions can be made with less reactivity. The effect is slow but durable. Coordination on a larger scale follows the same logic. Nodes rarely, if ever, attempt mass conversion. They influence by stabilizing local systems. When many nodes occupy a region, workplaces, schools, neighborhoods, the combined effect is felt as a background steadiness. People may not know why things feel less fractious. They simply notice a softer hum. That is the intended goal, to create pockets of coherence that multiply without coercion. We should address the social costs that selection sometimes brings. Becoming more present often necessitates new boundaries. Mothers, partners, friends may not understand the changes at first. Some relationships will shift and some will dissolve. This is not a moral failing, it is an inevitable consequence of shifting frequency. The ethical work here is to accompany change with honesty, communicate your limits gently, offer reassurance where possible, and accept the grief that arises. The loss of some connections may be painful, but new connections, often subtler and more aligned, appear over time. There is also a spiritual humility required. To be a carrier is not to become indispensable. The field shifts because many factors converge, not because one person holds everything. The healthiest nodes cultivate redundancy. They train others, they step back regularly, and they encourage autonomy rather than dependency. In that way, the grid becomes resilient instead of brittle. Before we close, return once more to your body. Notice the chest warmth, the small tightening under the ribs. Let your attention find the place where the internal pivot first lodged. You have been given an outline, practices, and an ethics to live by. None of this is meant to aggrandize you. It is meant to give language to what has likely been happening inside you for some time. Here is one final optional anchor to seal what you have learned today. Keep it private. Use it as a short vow in the morning or as a quiet sign-off at night. Write it slowly or say it silently. I hold steady. I serve through presence. I refuse to use my sensitivity as a weapon. This phrase is not a spell. It is a compact, a personal reminder that the work requires discipline, restraint, and mercy.
If it resonates, repeat it for a week and notice what changes in your attention and behavior. If it does not, hold nothing against yourself. The practice is yours to adopt selectively. You were identified. You were positioned. Remember that those phrases are not theatrical. They are markers of readiness. Readiness requires you to be present, to practice, and to steward your sensitivity with care. If you are ready to be held during this acceleration, if you want a protected place to practice containment, to receive denser transmissions, and to coordinate with peers who carry similar resonance, consider joining the protected member circle where deeper stabilization work is offered. It is a space for rehearsal, for mutual support, and for guided integration. The invitation is gentle and optional. It is there if you wish for containment and practice alongside others on a similar path. Keep breathing. Keep checking back into your chest. Keep the small rituals that make steadiness habitual. The work ahead is less about spectacle and more about steady fidelity to the small everyday tasks of being human with expanded capacity. The field will respond to your steadiness over time, not overnight. Finally, when you feel the warmth again, place a hand over your heart and say, silently or in writing, the closing vow you choose. I hold steady. I serve through presence. Let that be your quiet signature as you return to life. Paying bills, answering emails, sitting in traffic, loving people poorly and then better, practicing again.
You were identified. You were positioned. Walk forward with tenderness and discipline. If you choose to seek deeper support, the protected field is available to help you stabilize and practice. Walk softly. Keep the light steady.